Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. The next morning, Liam sat in his penthouse apartment, the cold, early morning light filtering in through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He leaned back in his chair, staring out at the sprawling city below, but his mind was far from the usual corporate matters that demanded his attention. His thoughts kept drifting back to the cafe. The woman, Emma, was it? Her nervous smile, the way she had spoken so quickly, trying to cover up the awkwardness of the mistake. He hadn't expected to think about her again, let alone wonder what she was doing now. But that's exactly what was happening. He found himself thinking about how she had seemed so real. The kind of person who didn't hide behind masks or pretense. How had he gone this long without noticing how rare that was? Shaking his head, Liam stood up and walked over to the coffee machine. He could still hear her voice in his head, echoing that nervous laugh. He hadn't even corrected her when she called him Kevin. Maybe he should have. Maybe it would have been easier to move on if he had. But for some reason, he hadn't wanted to let go of that brief, simple interaction. He filled his mug and took a sip, letting the warmth of the coffee spread through him. But it did little to shake the feeling of emptiness. As he walked back to his desk, his phone buzzed again, pulling him back to reality. Another reminder about the paperwork for the house. The house. He had bought it to get away from everything. But now he was questioning whether running away was really the answer. Later that afternoon, after a few more hours of sorting through emails and back-to-back meetings, Liam decided to take a break. He grabbed his jacket and left his apartment, stepping into the crisp air of the city. The walk was refreshing, and it helped clear his head a bit. As he strolled along, he thought back to Emma. What would it have been like to sit down and actually talk to her, without all the awkwardness? Maybe they could have been friends, or maybe something more. He couldn't help but wonder what it would be like to have someone in his life who didn't see him as a CEO, a millionaire, or a businessman, but just him. His thoughts were interrupted when he walked by a small, cozy cafe on the corner. His eyes caught the sign, and for a moment, he stood there, staring at it. The same cafe, the one where he had met Emma. He didn't know why, but something pulled him inside. Maybe it was the strange sense of familiarity, or maybe it was the desire to see her again. He opened the door and stepped inside. The same soft hum of conversation filled the air, and the warm lighting made the place feel inviting. He walked up to the counter, ordered a coffee, and waited, scanning the room for any sign of her. As he stood there, a voice from behind the counter caught his attention. "Can I get your name for the order?" the barista asked with a smile. "Liam," the barista repeated as she wrote it down. "Isn't that the same name as the guy from the other day? The one who was mistaken for Kevin?" He froze, his heart skipping a beat. He turned slowly, unsure whether the barista was talking about the same situation. But then, she smiled knowingly, as if she'd figured it out herself. "Oh, I remember. You were the guy she thought was Kevin," she said. She looked so embarrassed when she realized it was the wrong table. Liam's mind raced. Emma, the woman from the cafe. She had been here, and the barista remembered her. That meant she came back. Maybe there was more to this than just a random mix-up. "Yeah," Liam said, his voice low. "I guess I was the wrong Kevin." He chuckled lightly, trying to brush it off. But inside, he was anything but casual. He was beginning to realize just how much that brief encounter had meant to him. The barista handed him his coffee with a smile. "You never know," she said. "Maybe she'll be back again. A lot of people come here for a second chance at a first impression." "Yeah, maybe," Liam replied, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips as he took the coffee. He turned to leave, but then paused. "Do you happen to know when she'll be back?" The barista shrugged. "Hard to say. She comes by now and then, but she's usually here later in the day. You never know when someone will show up, though." Liam nodded, the strange urge to see her again growing stronger. He took his coffee and left the cafe, the cool air biting at his face as he stepped back onto the street. As he walked, he thought about what he would say to her if they met again. Maybe this time, he'd tell her who he really was. Or maybe, just maybe, he'd let the awkwardness linger. There was something about the uncertainty of it all that felt refreshing. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced in a long time. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city streets, Liam felt a sense of anticipation building within him. He wasn't sure what the future held, but one thing was clear: he couldn't stop thinking about Emma. And that, in itself, was enough to make him wonder if he was finally ready for something more than just business deals and empty luxury. But for now, he would wait, just like everyone else. And maybe, just maybe, he would get his second chance at a first impression. The next day, Liam couldn't shake the feeling of anticipation. He had left the cafe the evening before, telling himself that it was just a passing thought, that it wasn't important. But as he walked through his penthouse, the vast space suddenly felt colder, emptier. He found himself staring out the window, watching the bustling city below, yet his mind was elsewhere. It was early afternoon, and he had a full schedule ahead, but he couldn't focus. His thoughts kept drifting back to Emma. Was she real? Was that connection really something? Or was it just the result of a random mix-up? He still couldn't decide, but one thing was certain: he wanted to know more. He had never been the kind of man to dwell on chance encounters, but there was something about her that had captured his attention in a way no business deal or expensive acquisition ever could. He glanced at his phone, half expecting a message from his lawyer, but there was nothing urgent. Instead, his eyes landed on the calendar. A charity gala was coming up in just a few days, a high-profile event he couldn't afford to skip. He had been planning to attend, but now, a new thought was starting to form. Would Emma be there? It was possible. She had mentioned something about her love for art, and this gala was supposed to feature a prestigious art exhibit. He'd heard of it before, but it hadn't piqued his interest. Now, it felt like the only thing that mattered. His mind was made up. He was going. But as the night of the event approached, Liam found himself growing more anxious than he'd like to admit. The usual confidence he carried in boardrooms and business meetings seemed to fade when it came to something as unpredictable as this. Something that wasn't about deals or power, but about people. Real, complicated people. The night of the gala arrived, and Liam, dressed in his usual tailored suit, stepped into the grand hall of the museum, his eyes scanning the room. Elegant guests in extravagant outfits surrounded him, but his attention was fixed on one thing. If Emma was here, he had to find her. The gala buzzed with conversation, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses mixing with the soft strains of a string quartet playing in the background. Liam moved through the crowd, his gaze sweeping over the sea of faces, wondering if he would recognize her. The moment felt surreal, almost like a scene from one of the romantic films he had avoided in the past. He wasn't the type of man to chase after something so uncertain, but this felt different. As he wandered deeper into the exhibit hall, something caught his eye. There, standing in front of a stunning painting, was Emma. She looked out of place, but in the best possible way. Her dress wasn't as polished or extravagant as the other women around her, but she wore it with a kind of effortless grace that made her stand out even more. She was engrossed in the art, her brow furrowed in concentration as if the world around her didn't exist. Liam stood still for a moment, taking in the sight of her. She didn't notice him at first, and he almost turned away, but something stopped him. This time he wasn't going to let her run off. He wasn't going to let this be another missed opportunity. He took a deep breath and walked up to her, his footsteps quiet on the polished floor. "So, I guess this is where I find you," he said, his voice soft but steady. Emma turned, her eyes wide with surprise, and for a moment, the recognition in her expression was unmistakable. The same nervous energy from their first meeting returned, but this time, it felt different. She smiled awkwardly, stepping back slightly. "Liam, right?" she said, her voice tinged with disbelief. "I didn't expect to see you here." She laughed lightly, though there was a nervous edge to it. I'm surprised you came. I thought, last time. Well. She motioned vaguely, clearly referring to the misunderstanding at the cafe. "I couldn't stay away," Liam replied, his smile genuine. "You left so quickly, I thought I'd never see you again." Emma's cheeks flushed slightly, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was charged with the kind of tension that came with the possibility of something real happening, something neither of them had anticipated. Then, Emma stepped closer, her gaze flicking to the painting she had been admiring before. "I love this one," she said, gesturing to the piece in front of them. "There's just something about it that speaks to me. Maybe because it's raw, It's not perfect, but it feels real. Liam looked at the painting, but his attention was fixed on her, not the art. I get that, he said quietly. Real, that's the word. It's been a long time since I've felt anything real. Emma met his eyes for a brief moment before glancing away, her smile softening. Well, she said, I guess sometimes you have to let yourself feel things, even if it's uncomfortable. Their conversation continued, easy and unhurried, as if time had slowed around them. Liam didn't know what he was hoping for, but he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her. She wasn't the kind of woman he could ignore, and the way she saw the world, honestly, without pretense, was something he couldn't find in his usual circles. He hadn't expected to connect with anyone this way, especially not after everything he had built, but here he was, hoping for more. As the evening went on, they moved together through the gallery, sharing quiet conversations about the art, their lives, and the world around them. The night felt different from all the others he had attended. This time, he wasn't just showing up for appearances. For the first time in years, Liam felt like he was truly living. As the night progressed, Liam and Emma found themselves standing near a large window, looking out over the city lights that twinkled like stars below. The gala buzzed around them, but for the first time, Liam didn't feel like he was part of the crowd. His attention was entirely on her. She was different from the people he usually spent time with. There was no facade, no hidden agenda. Just her. Just Emma. And, despite all the grandeur around them, it was her presence that made everything feel real. They talked about everything and nothing. Art, dreams, the struggles of everyday life, and the little things that made them who they were. It was easy, effortless, like they had known each other for years. As the night wore on, Liam's heart felt lighter, and he realized, for the first time in a long while, that he was actually enjoying himself. The walls he had built around himself were starting to crack, and Emma was the reason. She was nothing like the people he'd known, the ones who saw him as a walking bank account, a business partner, or just a means to an end. With Emma, there was no pretense. Just raw, unfiltered honesty. But just as the night seemed to be falling into place, something shifted. A familiar voice broke through the moment, pulling Liam's attention away from Emma. He turned to see his business associate, Robert, walking toward them with a glass of champagne in his hand. Robert flashed a quick smile at Emma, before turning to Liam. Liam, glad to see you here, buddy, Robert said, clapping him on the back. I've been looking for you. We've got a lot of work to do, and I was just about to head out. Come on, let's talk for a minute. Liam felt the shift instantly. The weight of his business life, his world of board meetings, contracts, and constant pressure, was crashing back in. For a moment, he hesitated, glancing at Emma. She stood there, silently, her expression unreadable. He could see the disappointment in her eyes. She didn't need to say anything. The moment had passed. I'll be right back, Liam said quickly, forcing a smile. Just a quick conversation. Emma nodded, though there was a subtle shift in her posture, a slight distance growing between them as he walked away. As Liam followed Robert through the crowd, the nagging feeling that he was about to lose something important settled in his chest. He had been so caught up in the moment, in the connection with Emma, that he had forgotten about the life he had built for himself. This constant cycle of work, expectations, and obligations. He walked with Robert toward the exit, but his mind kept drifting back to Emma. What had just happened? Why did it feel like his entire life had just changed in a matter of hours? I really need you to look over the numbers, Robert said, pulling Liam back into the world he had tried so hard to escape. We're losing a bit of momentum with the deal. You know how these things go. If we don't push, we could lose the whole thing. Liam nodded absently, his mind still far away. He knew Robert was right. He couldn't afford to let things slip, especially not now when everything seemed to be at stake. But there was a part of him that didn't want to care. He wanted to go back to the gallery, to the warmth of Emma's smile, the easy conversation, the feeling of being seen for who he truly was. As the conversation dragged on, Liam found his mind wandering. He excused himself shortly after, telling Robert that he needed to make a call. But as he turned, his eyes met Emma's across the room. She was standing by the large painting they had admired earlier, her gaze fixed on the artwork but her body tense. Liam could tell that she was waiting for him to come back. The weight of the world seemed to hang between them. He walked toward her slowly, the distance between them feeling heavier with every step. She didn't look up as he approached, and for a moment, Liam hesitated. He had been so caught up in his business, in the chaos of his life, that he had almost forgotten why he was there in the first place. To find something real. To find someone like her. He had to fix this. "I'm sorry," Liam said, softly, standing beside her. "I didn't mean to leave like that." Emma finally turned to him, her expression softening slightly. "It's okay," she said quietly. "I get it. You have your own life, your own things to do." But Liam could hear the edge in her voice, and it made something twist in his chest. He wasn't used to feeling this way, vulnerable. But there was something about Emma, about her unguarded nature, that made him want to open up, to let go of the walls he had spent so long building. "No, you don't get it," he said, his voice low but firm. "I've spent so much time focused on everything else, on business, on the people I thought mattered. But the truth is, it's always felt empty. And tonight, for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel that way. I don't want to lose that." Emma's eyes softened, and for a moment, the world seemed to fade around them. The gala, the crowd, the expectations, all of it was gone. It was just the two of them, standing together, finally seeing each other clearly. "So what now?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Liam smiled, the weight lifting off his shoulders. "Now, I finally start living. With no more excuses." The next few days felt different for Liam. It was like the fog had lifted, and he could see his life for what it really was. He spent less time in board meetings, less time thinking about acquisitions, and more time thinking about what he truly wanted. Emma had given him something he hadn't realized he needed, a chance to remember what it was like to feel human, to feel connected. Every day, he found himself thinking about her more. He knew the gala had been a turning point, but he also knew that the easy moments they shared weren't just coincidence. Something was happening between them, and it felt like it had been building up for years, not days. Emma was everything he hadn't expected. She wasn't impressed by his wealth, his status, or the life he had worked so hard to build. She was simply interested in him, Liam, not the CEO or the millionaire. He decided to reach out to her. His life had been filled with planned meetings and calculated moves for so long, but this felt different. This wasn't a deal or a contract. It was just a chance to see where this thing with Emma could go. He knew he had to try. He wasn't the type to chase after fleeting emotions, but there was something about Emma that made him feel like he had to. He picked up his phone and sent her a text. "I know this might be sudden, but I can't stop thinking about our conversation at the gala. Would you be open to grabbing coffee with me sometime? No business talk, just us." He sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, waiting for a response. His heart raced a little faster than it should have. What if she didn't respond? What if she had already moved on from that brief encounter? But then his phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "I'd love that," the message read. "How about tomorrow morning at the cafe? Same one we met at." Liam couldn't help but smile. Tomorrow. It was a small step, but it felt like everything. He replied quickly, confirming the time, and then sat back, letting out a breath he hadn't realized he had been holding. This was happening. He was making a choice to open himself up, and that felt like the right thing to do. The next morning, Liam found himself walking through the same cafe where they had met. The familiar buzz of conversation, the sound of coffee being poured, and the soft clinking of cups filled the air. This time, though, he felt more at ease. He wasn't here for a business deal or to be someone he wasn't. He was just Liam, waiting to see where this connection could go. He saw Emma before she saw him. She was sitting by the window, her sketchbook open in front of her. The sunlight filtered through the window, casting a soft glow over her as she scribbled something in the book. Liam stood there for a moment, watching her. She was lost in her art, completely unaware of his presence. And in that moment, he saw her not as the woman he met at the gala, but as someone real. Someone who could fill the empty spaces he had ignored for so long. He walked over, his heart skipping a beat. "Good morning," he said softly. Emma looked up, her face lighting up with recognition. "Liam," she said, smiling brightly. "It's good to see you again. I hope I didn't keep you waiting." He smiled back, sitting down across from her. "Not at all. I just got here." He paused for a moment, taking in the peaceful atmosphere of the cafe. "You're drawing?" he asked, nodding toward her sketchbook. Emma nodded, her fingers still holding the pencil. "Yeah, I've always loved to sketch. It's my way of thinking, you know. When words fail, I draw." She shrugged, almost as if it was no big deal, but Liam could see the passion in her eyes. He could feel it in the way she spoke about her art. "That's really amazing," he said, genuinely impressed. I've always been in a world of numbers, contracts, and deadlines. It's hard to imagine being so free, you know? She smiled, leaning back in her chair. Well, we all need something to escape to. Some of us just find it in different places. There was a long pause as Liam thought about what she said. He realized that she was right. His world had been filled with everything but freedom, everything but the ability to simply be. He had been running from his own feelings for so long, focusing only on what he thought was important. But now, with Emma, he was beginning to understand that maybe it was time to start living for himself. It wasn't about the power, the money, or the status. It was about finding something real, something worth holding on to. As they sat there, talking about their lives, their hopes, and their dreams, Liam felt a sense of peace he hadn't felt in years. It was as though Emma had unlocked a part of him he had kept buried for far too long. This wasn't just a casual meeting. This was the start of something that felt important, something he couldn't walk away from. By the time they finished their coffee, it was clear that this wasn't the end of their story. Liam didn't know exactly where it was going, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid to find out. He stood up, looking at Emma with a smile. I'm glad we did this, he said. Maybe we can do it again sometime. She looked up at him, her smile wide. I'd like that. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Liam felt the weight on his shoulders lift. This wasn't just a meeting. This was the beginning of a new chapter. In the days that followed, Liam found himself feeling more alive than he had in years. His world, which had once revolved around cold meetings, high-rise buildings, and endless numbers, now seemed a little brighter, a little warmer. Emma had brought something into his life that he hadn't realized he was missing. Honesty, simplicity, and a sense of connection that went beyond the superficial layers of wealth and status. He still spent his days in meetings, still dealt with contracts and financial reports, but now, he found himself looking forward to the moments when he could see her again. They had met a few more times since their coffee date, each time feeling more comfortable with one another. Their conversations flowed easily, with Emma sharing stories of her art and life, while Liam opened up in ways he hadn't with anyone before. She didn't expect anything from him. She didn't want his money or his position, she just wanted him. And that was something Liam was learning to appreciate more than he could ever explain. One evening, after a particularly long day of negotiations and business decisions, Liam found himself walking through the familiar streets of the city. His mind wasn't on the latest deal or the next meeting, it was on Emma. He hadn't seen her in a couple of days, and the space between their last conversation and this moment felt longer than it actually was. He couldn't get the image of her smile out of his head or the sound of her laughter. Every time they spoke, it felt like the weight of the world had been lifted from his shoulders. He hadn't realized how much he had been carrying until she came into his life. As he reached the cafe where they'd first met, he paused for a moment, the familiar warmth of the place drawing him in. It was quiet tonight, with only a few customers scattered around the room, sipping coffee and reading. He stepped inside and walked to the counter, ordering his usual before making his way to the window seat where he'd first noticed her. As he settled into the seat, his mind wandered to the conversation they'd had the week before. She had asked him about his life, about what he wanted outside of work, outside of everything that defined him in the business world. For the first time in years, he had been unsure of how to answer. He had always known what he wanted: more success, more power, more influence. But with Emma, that didn't feel like enough anymore. He wanted to feel something. He wanted to know what it was like to live without constantly measuring his success. She had made him realize that he didn't need to be the best at everything, that maybe, just maybe, it was okay to let go. But what did that mean for him? Was he ready to make that change? He was still figuring it out, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't do it without her. Just as he took a sip of his coffee, the door to the cafe opened, and in walked Emma. She was dressed casually tonight, her usual grace still evident even in her simple jeans and sweater. Her eyes scanned the room until they landed on him. A smile immediately spread across her face, and Liam's heart skipped a beat. It was always like this with her, effortless. She walked over, her presence calming him in a way nothing else ever had. Hey, she said, her voice light and warm. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. I thought I'd find you here. She pulled out the chair across from him and sat down, her eyes twinkling with the same spark that made her so captivating. You're not interrupting, Liam replied, smiling back at her. I was just thinking about you, actually. His words caught him off guard, but they felt true. He didn't have to hide his feelings from her. She was the first person in a long time who made him feel like he could just be himself. Emma raised an eyebrow, a playful grin on her face. Thinking about me? That's a first. She leaned forward slightly, as if waiting for him to elaborate. Liam chuckled softly, taking another sip of his coffee to buy himself a little time. Yeah, well, he said, setting the cup down. You've kind of been on my mind a lot lately. In a good way. Her eyes softened, and she reached across the table, her fingers brushing against his. I'm glad to hear that, she said quietly. I've been thinking about you, too. I know we're still getting to know each other, but there's something. Here, Liam. I feel it. For a moment, the world outside the cafe seemed to disappear. It was just the two of them, sitting across from each other, sharing a moment that felt like it was meant to happen. Liam could feel the sincerity in her words, in her touch. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of where this was going. He knew there was something special between them, something real, and he didn't want to let it slip away. I feel it too, Liam said, his voice steady, but with an underlying warmth that matched the moment. And I think I'm ready to see where this goes. I don't want to overthink it, I just want to enjoy it. With you. Emma smiled, her face lighting up in a way that made Liam's heart swell. Good, she said softly. Because I'm ready too. They sat there, hands still touching, the conversation flowing easily between them. For the first time in a long time, Liam didn't feel like he was chasing something. He wasn't trying to be someone he wasn't. He was simply living, and for the first time in years, that was enough. Weeks passed, and Liam and Emma's connection only grew stronger. Their meetings became more frequent, and each time they spent together felt more like a step towards something real. Liam began to realize that, despite his initial fears, he had been avoiding the one thing that had the power to truly change him. Human connection. With Emma, he didn't feel like the billionaire businessman. He didn't feel like the CEO who everyone wanted something from. He was just Liam, and that was the most freeing feeling he had experienced in years. But as they got closer, the reality of their differences started to surface. One evening, after a particularly meaningful conversation about their dreams and ambitions, Emma turned to Liam, her expression serious. I need to ask you something, she said softly. Do you ever wonder if we're too different? I mean, you live this world of power and wealth, and I'm just someone trying to make it as an artist. You've spent your life building an empire, and I've spent mine learning how to make art. What if those worlds can never really meet? Liam paused, taking in her words. He had been so wrapped up in the feeling of connection, of finally being seen for who he really was, that he hadn't fully considered the challenges that would come with it. He could see the worry in her eyes, and it made his chest tighten. I don't know, Liam said honestly, but I don't want to focus on the differences. We've already shared so much. I don't want to lose that just because things are complicated. I'm not asking you to live my life, Emma. I just want to share this life with you. Our life. Emma's eyes softened, and she took a deep breath. I know, but sometimes I feel like I'm holding you back. Like I'm not good enough for you. You have everything. Money, power, the world at your feet. And then there's me, just trying to make it. Liam reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. Emma, you don't need to be good enough for me. You are enough. It's not about the things you have or don't have. It's about what we can build together. You've already given me more than I ever imagined. You've made me realize what truly matters. And that's you. That's us. Emma's face softened, and she squeezed his hand. I don't want to feel like we're in two different worlds. I want us to be in the same world, together. Then we will be, Liam said, his voice full of certainty. I've spent too long focusing on what I don't have. But with you, I'm starting to see that I've been looking at everything all wrong. We can build something real, Emma. Something that matters. She smiled, the worry in her eyes fading. Okay, let's do it. Together. The weight that had been hanging over them seemed to lift, replaced by a shared sense of determination. Emma was right to question their differences, but in that moment, Liam realized that it wasn't about fitting into the same mold. It was about finding a way to make it work, despite the challenges, despite the differences. Together, they could overcome anything. Over the next few days, Liam's focus shifted. He was no longer solely concerned with business deals and acquisitions. He found himself making time for Emma, prioritizing their moments together. He started to feel like the man he had always wanted to be, not just someone defined by his wealth, but someone who could love, who could give, who could truly connect. But just as things seemed to be falling into place, a new challenge emerged. One morning, Liam received a call that he had been dreading. A problem with one of his business investments had surfaced, and it was threatening to undo everything he had worked for. The pressure of the situation weighed heavily on him. He had worked so hard to get to where he was, and now, everything was at risk. Emma noticed the shift in his mood when he arrived at their meeting spot later that day. "What's wrong?" she asked, her voice full of concern. Liam hesitated, then ran a hand through his hair. "It's business," he said, trying to brush it off. "Some issues came up, and it's looking like everything might fall apart. I'm not sure what to do." Emma reached out and gently placed her hand on his. "Whatever it is, you don't have to face it alone. You have me, and we'll figure it out, together." Her words, simple but sincere, hit him harder than he expected. He had been so used to carrying the weight of the world alone, thinking that was the only way to survive. But with Emma, he didn't have to. And in that moment, he realized that no matter what happened with his business, he had something far more important, someone who truly cared. He smiled, feeling a renewed sense of calm. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice full of gratitude. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "You don't have to," Emma replied with a reassuring smile. "I'm right here." And for the first time in a long time, Liam believed it. Together, they could face whatever came next. In the weeks that followed, Liam found himself in a whirlwind of emotions. The business crisis that had threatened to undo everything had slowly begun to stabilize, but the strain it caused him remained. However, through it all, there was one constant: Emma. Every moment they spent together felt like a breath of fresh air, a reminder that there was more to life than the cold, calculated world he had built. With her, he felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. They continued to meet regularly, their connection deepening each time. Their conversations were no longer just about the surface things. They shared their hopes, fears, and dreams, each moment making it clearer that what they had was something real, something that could withstand the challenges of their very different lives. One evening, after a quiet dinner at her apartment, Liam found himself sitting across from Emma, the soft glow of the table lamp casting a warm light over her features. She was talking about her latest art project, her voice animated and passionate as she described the details. He couldn't help but admire the way she spoke, the way she brought so much life into everything she did. He had never met anyone quite like her. But as she spoke, he noticed a shift in her demeanor, a subtle hesitation that hadn't been there before. She paused mid-sentence, her gaze dropping to her lap. "Emma," Liam asked softly, his voice filled with concern. "What's wrong?" She looked up at him, her eyes a little too bright. "I've been thinking, Liam. About us. About this, what we're building. I know it's been amazing, and I don't want to sound like I'm pushing you away, but sometimes, I wonder if this is just too good to be true. I'm not in your world, Liam. I'm not part of that high society, that business world. And I'm afraid I might not be enough for you." Liam's heart sank at her words. He had never once doubted her place in his life, but hearing her speak this way made him realize how deeply she feared the differences between them. The uncertainty, the vulnerability in her voice, made him see just how much she was struggling with their connection. He reached across the table, gently taking her hands in his. "Emma, listen to me," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't care about that world anymore. I care about you. You've already given me more than I ever expected, more than any business deal or acquisition ever could. You make me feel things I didn't even know I was missing. You're more than enough for me. I don't need anything else." She looked at him, her eyes searching his, as if looking for the truth in his words. Slowly, she nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "I really do." "Then believe it," Liam said softly. "I'm not going anywhere. We're in this together, Emma. No matter where you come from or where we go, we'll figure it out." For a moment, there was only silence between them, the weight of their words hanging in the air. Then, Emma reached up, cupping his face in her hands, and kissed him gently, as if sealing the promise they had made to each other. Liam responded, the kiss deepening as he pulled her closer, knowing that whatever challenges they might face, they would face them together. The next day, as Liam left Emma's apartment, he felt a renewed sense of clarity. He had always thought he was in control of his life, that he had everything figured out. But with Emma, he realized that life wasn't just about control. It was about connection. It was about finding someone who made you feel whole, who helped you rediscover parts of yourself that you had long since forgotten. And that was something he was no longer willing to let go of. As he walked to his car, his phone buzzed with an email notification. It was from his lawyer, with an update on the business deal he had been working on for months. But for the first time in a long time, Liam didn't feel the immediate rush to check it. He left his phone in his pocket and continued to walk, the weight of the world now feeling just a little bit lighter. He had everything he needed right here, in this moment. And with Emma by his side, he knew he was ready to face whatever the future held. As weeks passed, Liam and Emma continued to grow closer, their bond solidifying with every passing day. They had faced their insecurities, their doubts, and their differences, but in each other, they had found a sense of peace that neither had anticipated. Liam's world, once filled with business deals, cold meetings, and expectations, now seemed brighter with Emma by his side. They were not perfect, but they were real. The connection between them was undeniable, and it was more than just the chemistry. They had something deeper, something built on trust, vulnerability, and acceptance. Emma had taught him to slow down, to appreciate the small moments, and to embrace the life outside of his corporate bubble. And in turn, Liam had helped Emma see that her dreams were not just possible, but worthy of pursuit. She wasn't just an artist trying to make it. She was someone with vision, passion, and the strength to change her own life. Together, they had become something more than what they had been alone. One quiet afternoon, Liam stood outside Emma's apartment, his heart racing with excitement. He had planned this moment for days, carefully choosing the time, the place, and the words. As he stood there, waiting for her to come to the door, he realized how far they had come, from two people with very different worlds to a couple who had found a way to make it work. He had never been this certain about anything before, and the certainty filled him with an unfamiliar warmth. When Emma opened the door, her smile was the first thing he saw. That smile, the one that had caught him off guard the first time they met, the one that had softened the walls around his heart. She looked at him, her eyes sparkling, and he could see the love and trust they had built reflected in her gaze. "Liam, what's going on?" she asked with a teasing tone, sensing the change in his demeanor. Liam took a deep breath, his hands trembling slightly. "Emma, there's something I've been meaning to say," he began, his voice steady but full of emotion. "We've been through so much together, and there's no one else I want to be with but you. You've brought something into my life that I didn't even know was missing. You've shown me what it means to love, to live with purpose, and to embrace the beauty in the simple things." Emma's smile softened, her heart beating faster as she sensed where this was going. "Liam," she whispered. Liam dropped to one knee, the gesture making her eyes widen in surprise. He took her hand gently in his, looking up at her with a love that was unmistakable. "Emma Brooks," he said, his voice full of conviction, "will you marry me? Will you be by my side, through everything, for the rest of our lives?" The world seemed to stand still for a moment. Emma's breath caught in her throat, and for a second, she couldn't find the words. Her heart swelled with emotion. She had never expected something so profound, so meaningful. She looked down at Liam, seeing the sincerity in his eyes, and it all clicked. This wasn't just about him asking her to spend forever with him. It was about two people from different worlds, choosing each other, choosing love. "Yes," she said softly, the tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, I will marry you." Liam stood up, pulling her into a tight embrace, feeling the weight of the world lift from his shoulders. This was it. This was the moment that made everything else fade away. Together, they were unstoppable. Together, they would build a life filled with love, trust, and the kind of happiness they had both been searching for. As they pulled back, Liam kissed her gently, their lips meeting with a tenderness that spoke volumes. In that kiss, everything was said, everything they had been through, everything they had yet to experience, and everything they would face together. They didn't need words to understand the depth of what they shared. "I love you," Liam whispered. "I love you too," Emma replied, her heart full. "And I always will." And so, their story continued. A story of love, of growth, and of two people who had found something real in a world that often seemed too focused on what was surface level. Together, they had discovered the greatest truth of all. Love isn't about being perfect. It's about choosing each other every single day, through all the highs and lows, and building a life that is truly their own.